Okay, shall we start? Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Magomed Bezbayev and I'm responsible for Eastnet business development in Eastern Europe. Today we will cover the topic regarding new CSP requirements that will effective this July. And me and my colleagues Atala will tell you about how these changes will impact on bank business and how we can help the banks to meet with these new requirements. Our today presentation consists of 3 parts. The first one is the PowerPoint slides about new CSP requirements and how our application Payment Guard helps with this. Then we will show you a short video with explanation how our Payment Guard works. And finally, we will have Q&A part where you will be able to ask your questions about the topic. Also, you can drop your questions in question field of the platform on the right side of the presentation panel. So let's go forward. As I mentioned today, my colleague Atala and me will tell you what you need to know about new changes to the SWIFT customer security control framework. Why the changes are changing for financial institutions? Who we are and why Eastnet is a company that can help you to meet with new requirements. And how Eastnet anti-fraud application Payment Guard allows banks implement easily the mandatory scenarios that banks should use to check transactions. I would like to start our presentation with the brief introduction of Eastnet company background to understand why we're here today. Eastnet is a global provider of compliance and payment solution for the financial services sector. We are bringing more than 35 years experience and about 800 customers around the world are using our application and services. Our company has 3 main directions of business. It's very important to understand how it's related with today's topic. The first one is a SWIFT Service Bureau and the related services. The second one is application and services in AML, compliance, and anti-fraud area. The last one is a payment management and security solution and services. The company has deep knowledge around SWIFT network and how it works. And Eastnet team is official SWIFT customer security program service provider with more than 100 realized projects. So we know how SWIFT works and how CSP program works. Also, Eastnet has recognized this year as an industry awards winner in Reg-tech and the Risk-tech 100 charts. I'm sure that you are all familiar with SWIFT customer security program that aimed to make payment networks safe and reliable for transactions. So we don't need to spend much time to explain what this program is and why it's important to be compliant with. Last September, SWIFT announced that some of advisory controls of customer security program regarding transaction checks will become mandatory. You can find the new changes in point 2.9 part of customer security program. And banks should deploy any anti-fraud application to meet with this new requirement. The changes in CSP will effective since this July. But the one important thing I would like to put your attention is the time frame of SWIFT CSP audit process in this year. As you know, all audit-related action should be finished till the end of this year. But if you go backwards from the final point of customer security audit process, that is putting the audit reports in KYC portal, we need about 1 or 2 months for getting through the audit. Then we need about 1 month to get independent assessment of the report. So it means that the bank should deploy anti-fraud solution to meet with the new requirements no later than September of this year. It means that banks will not have a lot of time to find appropriate solutions that will help to manage with this new challenge. And exactly what we will tell you about today. Now, I will hand over to Atala, who is Eastnets product development leader, and he will elaborate more how Eastnet will help you to manage with this challenge.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for the warm introduction, and good day, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to our webinar today. As mentioned by Mohammed, today we will be walking you through the capabilities of our solution, Payment Guard, and how our solution can help you to comply and achieve the required controls for SWIFT CSP for year 2022. As a starter, Payment Guard is a payment fraud detection solution. It provides a modeling engine, a flexible modeling engine that will enable you to execute scenarios and detect suspicious payments and events. Our solution is, can you just click next, please, Dalia? Our solution consists of multiple components that will act together around the modeling engine to enable the execution of models and scenarios to detect, as we mentioned, suspicious payments, suspicious events, to be able to intercept them in real time, and to create the required alerts and detections with the proper management in order to verify those suspicious events and payments and to act accordingly. With that comes the capabilities of being able to execute custom scenarios and to configure differently each model to be more relevant to the scenario and the context that you are looking to fill. And in this particular case, we are talking about CSP, and we will be discussing how the models will act to cover the requirements, namely the ones that will be that was promoted as a mandatory requirement starting from this year. I'm not sure why the control is not working. Thank you, Dalia. Now, as in a nutshell, benefits of using Payment Guard can be described as you will be able to detect and prevent fraud losses in real time, because you will be able to intercept payments and events in real time. Payment Guard provides models that will be executed and used for multi-channel and cross-channel and dedicated channels. Those models are self-adapting, and that will reduce the effort that will be required for tuning or setting thresholds and the continuous process as a repeating task to tune conventional models. Those can be lifted and reduced by utilizing the machine learning models and self-adapting models. Payment Guard provides business intelligence features, dashboards, interactive reports, in addition to the link analysis that will be extremely useful and will simplify the investigation process for your officers whenever any payment or any event is intercepted. So link analysis will be extremely useful and will simplify the investigation process. And this will result in a high fraud detection rate, keeping the false positive low, as we mentioned, because we self-adapt, our models self-adapt to data and tightly fit to data. This will reduce the false positive. Those models that we implement to detect suspicious payments and events can be channel specific, which means that those models are dedicated for certain channels or are designed for that particular channel, unlike cross-channel or multi-channel, where you can utilize those models differently with different configurations and customizations for each channel, or even in case of cross-channel, you can combine the traffic from different channels into one scenario and detect cases or intercept suspicious payments based on feedback from multiple channels. Yeah. When it comes to risk analysis, we introduced in our solution the concept of transaction risk analysis, which means under the name of orchestral scenarios. And those scenarios are basically a combination of multiple scenarios. It can be 2 or more that will evaluate transactions from different aspects and will execute different models and scenarios against the same transaction. Combining them together as one orchestral scenario will enable us to calculate the risk value for that particular transaction, and accordingly, the system will be configured to act. For example, you can have 2 or 3 scenarios combined under one orchestral scenario, and then you come up with a value that represents the transaction risk at high, low, or medium, and accordingly, you will be acting against that particular transaction, whether to suspend it, to block it, so on and so forth. So overall, this will enable you to control the way the controls is being executed in a multi-aspect manner and execute the risk analysis and accordingly reduce the false positives as well. To categorize the fraud categories that the fraud types that we will be working with, on a high level, fraud can be categorized in 2 main categories. The first one is the fraud that is directed directly towards the financial institution. For example, fraud directed towards the messaging interface from SWIFT, the SWIFT Alliance access. And in such type of fraud, there is usually a cyber attack involved that will start with compromising the environment and then gaining access to messaging interface, like we mentioned, the SWIFT Alliance access, and then inject fraudulent messages, try to hide evidences, and much later, maybe 1 day, maybe 2 days, maybe after a long holiday, you will discover that fraud has took place, and then you will start acting. The other category of fraud that is also in our scope would be the fraud that is directed towards the client end, the end user. Can you click next, please? Yeah. And in this type of fraud, we are talking about things like identity theft or app fraud, false payments directed towards your retail customer, and try to manipulate those particular users in order to gain access to their accounts or devices and initiate fraudulent transactions. So in general, those are the main types on a high level of fraud, and Payment Guard will provide scenarios and models that will be able to act against those types differently for each case and according to each case requirement. As mentioned by Mohammed, in this year, there is a major update on the customer security program as part of the customer security control framework. And as you all know, I believe the requirements that has been ongoing since a few years, and the attestation that is required for each year. For this year, there is a new promoted control, as we mentioned, section 2.9. Transaction business control that will become mandatory, and in this session we will walk over all the requirements and how Payment Guard will be enabling you to fulfill those particular requirements and many others. Next, please. Yeah. So, as we mentioned, transaction business control is being promoted. It will be required for all architecture types, and independent assessment and attestation will be required starting from the second half of this year. And to simplify things, we just put together a list of those requirements that relate to section 2.9, and those will represent the overall picture that any institution will be looking to cover under this particular section. Next. So those are the 7 different requirements, and we will be discussing each one separately. And at the end, we will have samples of the models and scenarios that will be executed against each to fulfill specific requirements and to cover each point of those requirements in the best manner that would be applicable for each requirement. Next, please. Yeah. Starting from the first requirement, the limiting traffic outside of business hours. And in this particular requirement, what is required is to limit the traffic, the payment traffic, to certain hours within the day. And in this particular requirement, there are many levels of controls that will be required, starting from the conventional way of limiting the user access to certain time frame within the day, using calendars and linking each user to a specific calendar in order to control the time that they are able to execute payments, and the traffic as well that is usually initiated within working hours. For example, this is also linked to a calendar, but also what will be required in this case, because certain transactions are not normal within certain time frame within the day. Like, for example, a certain bank does not initiate transaction in US dollars in the morning, for example. And for them, this is a perfectly normal hour in the day, for example, like 9 a.m. to initiate any transaction. But this is not normal when it comes to US dollars transactions. So in this case, we will need to add another level of controls over the conventional controls the conventional one that we discussed, that will control holidays, that will control working hours, user working hours, so on and so forth. We will add an additional layer that will identify and learn from the data. Those models are based on machine learning and will learn and overfit to the data that you have in terms of logins, initiation of transactions, so on and so forth, and will cover cases where users are not usually initiating transaction in certain hours, or transactions are not normal in certain hours, and those will identify the features and will learn from the data, overfitting to your data in order to be precise when it comes to identifying suspicious activities. And in this way, we will cover this particular requirement in 2 levels, and will be more precise when it comes to identifying intraday suspicious activities. Next requirement is limiting traffic beyond normal business amount ranges. And in this, for this particular requirement, the target here is the amounts, mainly the amounts. And this can be covered in multiple ways. We are proposing here 4 different levels. The conventional way is to set some sort of threshold. That threshold will consider anything that goes beyond that particular threshold for the currency, reference currency, which is the local currency, correspondent, or the country, or any other feature of the transaction. When amounts exceed that particular set threshold, it will consider it as an anomaly or a suspicious transaction and will be suspended. And this will be the basic requirement or the basic control that can cover such requirements. Next, we can work on the aggregation of payments, the aggregation of US dollar payments that goes towards a certain country or correspondent, or the aggregation on a certain currency itself. So this is another level of covering such requirements. Adding to that, we can have, we also provide another type of controls that are based on AI to detect anomaly amounts that directly relates to correspondence, to certain customer, to certain currency, to certain, I would say, jurisdiction in general. And this will detect those anomalies based on the data that you provide to our models in order to train against your data and to identify suspicious transactions based on your data. And this is extremely important to be able to act on this level in order to also forecast what would be normal, because as we all know, business can grow or decline. Forecasting what will happen next based on the previous data is extremely important, also to be accurate in predicting suspicious or predicting the possibility of suspicious activity based on the known information, past transactions, and the amounts, features of the transactions in general. So this is the third type of controls that we provide. And finally, we have the statistical models that will overfit as well to your data in this manner, and will detect any suspicious activity based on statistical models that will be trained on your data. And this is the power of using such controls like the AI or the statistical models. Those can self-adapt and will not require tuning, unlike the aggregation or the amount thresholds, which are the basic controls. Now, in certain occasions, one can argue that one of those controls is enough, but as we all know, a combination of those will be required, and having as many controls that will monitor the activities and transactions from different aspects will be extremely powerful to detect suspicious activities or transactions. Requirement number 3 are directed towards confirmation messages, MT900 and MT910, and those are reconciled back with the known traffic, the outward traffic. Whenever you receive those types of messages, payment guards can act on those and can cross-check with the known transactions. And whenever there is a transaction that is listed under those messages does not match with the seen transactions, or simply the transaction that relates to this message is not there, a warning will be issued in our system, and you will be notified in order to act on those. Because this is not normal. Usually, what will happen is that each transaction should have a reference back in your back office and in payment guards as well. So we can cross-check with both back office and with payment guard repository in order to identify any missing transaction that is coming through the confirmation. So this is like a direct requirement that will act on those messages. Similarly, the next requirement will also act on the statement messages, the MT940 and MT950. And within those particular messages, all the transactions will be cross-checked, similar to what we do with the MT900 and MT910. And any missing transaction from your seen transactions will be also flagged, and you will get notification for that. And this will happen as you receive those messages. So everything is happening in real time. Next, please. Yeah. The reconciliation of daily traffic, and this happens in end of day as proposed by SWIFT, but in payment guard we provide a more of an interactive mechanism to cross-check all transactions, because simply the need for verifying transactions for authenticity is extremely important, and we provide a specific feature in our solution that will enable you to cross-check those transactions even before network. So any transaction that will be issued from your side will be cross-checked with your respective systems before even reaching the network, and we will be speaking about this particular feature in the coming slide. Performing central checks to spot any potential abnormal behavior, and this is, I would say, this is the most complex requirement of all the 7 requirements, because this will require verifying the transaction from different aspects and from different levels to identify any abnormal behavior, starting from the amounts to the routing of transactions itself. We act, for instance, in the case of SWIFT, we act on the amounts, correspondence, beneficiary, timing, country, routing inside of SWIFT, even to detect any manual action or unusual routing, so on and so forth. So there are much to be covered here, and this can be covered as required. We provide a set of standard models dedicated for this particular requirement to cover detection of abnormal behavior that will relate to characteristics of payments, or even operational wise, like routing and timing and so on and so forth. And the final requirement would be the detection of the session gaps that will happen on the message partners. And this indicates that the message partner, there was something going wrong on your message interface, and this is monitored with all the events that will be logged by SWIFT, SWIFT Alliance for case of SWIFT. And as soon as we detect those events, this will be notified to your side, and you will be able to act on those as soon as you get notified, which is also happening in real time. Next, please. Yeah. So as a summary, the approach to SWIFT as mitigation levels, as we mentioned, everything is happening in real time. We integrate directly with SWIFT Alliance with specific components that we inject in SWIFT Alliance, and we will be able to intercept traffic before even reaching the network, and we will be able to keep up with the updates from network in real time, verifying and cross-checking acknowledgements, notification, and statement messages, which will be extremely helpful in order to mitigate the risk of transactions that is suspicious and might be representing fraud cases. Yeah, next, please. So as we mentioned in the daily reconciliation, as I mentioned, our solution is capable of cross-checking back, and this happening through a direct integration with your back office system, payment system, core banking, or any other type of system. And once payment guard intercepts any transaction, it can integrate back with your core banking and back office systems to cross-check those transactions before even releasing them to the network. So each transaction is checked separately, and we make sure that those are authentic transactions that were initiated from your back office. And in using this mechanism will eliminate the need of doing an end-of-day reconciliation, because all transactions are checked regardless before even reaching network. Next, please. Yeah. So those are some examples of the models that can be utilized for CSP requirements, starting from operational aspects of the controls, like, for example, messages that are created and authorized from the same workstation. This is not a usual setup. Users usually are expected to have separate machines. So once creation and authorization happens from the same workstation, this is a red flag that will be detected by our scenarios and models. Modification of payments, in case, for example, you don't use any of the functionalities for modification from SWIFT Alliance, we can detect the modified payments, deleted or manipulated messages, manual actions that is not expected or not usual to your workflow can also be detected. Next, you have things like that relate to the logic of the or the business and the workflow business-wise, like structured payment, for example, when you have somebody trying to do structuring of payments, and this is not the structuring that we will be targeting under AML systems. This is a shorter period or time frame that will hold a similar structuring of payments that will indicate or raise a red flag towards a possibility of having a fraud case. The statement reconciliations that we mentioned, notifications as well, unusual corridors or obsolete correspondence. Whenever you somebody is trying to initiate a transaction that is going through an unusual payment corridor or going towards an obsolete correspondence, this is something that one of our models will detect and act on. Unusual number of transaction aggregation and amounts with a beneficiary bank, and this is one model that can be configured to detect anomalies or unusual activity for transactions or aggregation of transactions based on amount, so on and so forth. And finally, we have the models that we discussed in requirement number 1 for the unusual user working hours, and this is done directly by profiling user behavior and detecting any deviation from that usual behavior as a real-time event monitoring. Yeah. The solution Payment Guard is also providing a set of advanced analytics, including intuitive dashboards that will work in two different flavors: the presets one, the ones that we pre-ship, preset, and ship within our releases, as well as the self-service dashboards that you can build any custom dashboard that you wish to have, and those can be also be extremely helpful in order to monitor the traffic, to monitor the current situation, how many transactions were caught, so on and so forth. So dashboards and interactive reports can be built and customized according to your requirements, as well as the link analysis that will enable for simpler investigation process, and will unravel relations between accounts, customers, and detections that will simplify the overall process of investigation. And this is made available with the integration with your customer and account information that will enable the link analysis to be executed and to show the relations between entities. So what is the effect and or what is the added friction when it comes to executing those controls, and how to reduce the friction caused by fraud detection? First, we will start with the scoring of transactions, and this can be done, as we mentioned, through the orchestral scenarios that will score each transaction, and you will be able to set the threshold that will be for each scenario that it will be acting on, and this will enable you to control whatever will be suspended or will be in scope of the controls. Our solution can work in two modes: the blocking mode and non-blocking mode. And in case of non-blocking, you will just have a logging of suspicious activity rather than suspending the transactions. And on the other hand, you can also act in blocking mode, where you suspend transactions for investigation and will not allow them to flow before those transactions are being verified. Third, we have the automatic block, and those are for the scenarios that can identify an extremely risky or confirmed even a fraud case. For example, you can have a beneficiary or an ordering customer that directly links to an account that is known to do fraud. So in this case, you can also have the option of automatically blocking the transaction without any intervention from your users. Third, you have the option of challenging the customer, and in this case, Payment Guard will integrate with a third channel that will interact with the end customer and verify that this customer is the one who initiated the transaction. One example of that would be the SMS gateways that will provide a third mechanism that will authenticate the user who initiated the transaction. And all of this will add together until we finally reach to the manual investigation, where somebody has to log in to the system to verify the transaction and take the decision to block or release that particular transaction. Next, please. Yeah. So as we reached towards the end of our slides, and before we start the demo, why to choose our solution? Why Eastnets, and why Payment Guard from Eastnets? Eastnets has a long experience with CSP requirements over the past years, and we not only provide solution to cover fraud detection cases, we also provide CSP services, and we have executed more than 100 projects over the past few years with our customers, and this also provided us with lots of experience and knowledge to enable us to design our product to be implemented easily and smoothly. As I mentioned, our product covers CSP requirements, even the new ones that was just made or promoted to be mandatory, the Section 2.9, in addition to many other payment networks requirements and fraud prevention requirements. Deployment of our solution is available on both cloud and on-premises, which gives the flexibility required when it comes to deployment, and this also refers to your preference when it comes to deployment flavor. And also, when it comes to deployment over the cloud, we have many live customers as we speak today on our service bureau as a SaaS offering, and with our partners, service bureau partners, also deploying on their cloud environments. So those are the points that I would like to share. We can start now with the demo. The demo will consist of a walkthrough of the system, and basically you will be able to just see how easy it is to configure the models, to create the scenarios, and to deal with the configuration of the system. So this is the user interface of Payment Guard, starting with samples of the model. Requirement number one, limiting traffic within normal time frames. So we navigate to the model manager to configure the particular model we'll be using. In this particular case, we are using the model that we call transaction at unusual time, and this is a predictive model, machine learning model. Now we are setting the parameters for that particular model, the learning period, the schedule of learning, training the model, I mean, as well as the deviation, the default value for the deviation from the usual time. Once we configure the model, we create the scenario to link it to a certain type of transaction. So we create a new scenario. The new scenario will be linked to a transaction type, like, for example, MT103. Here we are targeting Alliance Access, RGE format. We set the zone, and we choose the action to be stop for investigation, and then choose the model, transaction at unusual time. This is the model name. And then the parameter for this model is the deviation from the usual time. So everything is being handled by the model. It learns from the data, and it allows for a certain deviation limit before it starts to act on those transactions, possibly suspend them. Next example would be limiting traffic beyond normal ranges. Yeah. So example of that would be the aggregation of one MT103 per BIC. This is the name of the model that will handle this requirement. Yeah. So we choose the reference amount, we choose the period, the BICs, and then we create the scenario based on this model. And in this particular case, we are targeting MT103. So again, we choose the Alliance Access. The format would be RGE. The message type, yeah. The model name is the aggregation of MT103s, and the message type is MT103. Then we set the parameters, which override the default ones that we assign to the base model. So the aggregation reference in this case is 10K. Monitoring period is 4 hours. So it looks back of a period of 4 hours. So whenever the aggregation of those exceeds the threshold within a certain time frame, which is 4 hours in this case, the model will start acting on the transaction. Setting notification, email notification, whenever a detection is raised, an email notification will be received. Another example of abnormal behavior would be the unusual payment corridor, where you will detect intermediary banks that are not usually part of your payment routing. So unusual payment corridor is a predictive model that is part of our standard modeling library. So learning period, again, learning minimum occurrences, which is the minimum occurrences of the same intermediary bank to consider it as normal. Threshold to be learned, which is the amount that is listed under the transaction to take that particular transaction as part of the training set. Again, we create the scenario. We choose the model, select the message type, MT103 for this example, and the action. Yeah. So the threshold for reference amount is the one that would be required for this particular model. And in this case, we choose 5K. Calendar linked to that particular scenario. Yeah. So after the model detects an abnormal behavior, for example, it will issue a detection that will suspend, for example, if you choose the suspend action, suspend that particular transaction, and you will be able to deal with that particular detection through our detection manager. Here we present the search criteria, which can be utilized to search for transactions that is suspended and detections that require action. After you search, set the criteria, you can collapse the menu, and you will be presented with all the detections that will require action. So those are the violations or the detection details that was raised by the specific models, and this can have one or more violations depending on the number of the scenarios that is executed for each type of payment. So one or more violation will be expected with the details of the payments on the left pane. You can add the comments, attach some evidences if required. And then after you have just made all the required checks, you can release or block that particular transaction, and action will be reflected directly on SWIFT Alliance through the integration that we have. So in this case, we are choosing the release action, and the transaction will be released. Detection management and the alert treatment can also work in 4eyes as well. So you have maker checker, for example. As we mentioned, part of the investigation process, you might need to have to analyze the links between account and customer, and this is basically facilitated through the link analysis that we provide under our application, and this is how it looks. So for example, here for a certain customer, I want to see all the previous detections that were logged against that particular customer, and this is what you will be presented with. All the cases, detection IDs, and details for that particular customer, which will simplify the investigation process. Finally, we have the BI capabilities, the dashboards, and as we mentioned, those are available in two modes, designer mode and the preset mode. For the presets, those are just some examples of what we ship as part of our product. You will be able to monitor the overall situation with the number of false positive, real fraud cases, or real detections. You can expand and drill down those dashboard elements. And in case of you choose to create your own dashboards through the designer mode, you will be able to also build the dashboards as you need. Those are the reports and the interactive reports that you can also build with our BI feature. So I believe this is it for the demonstration. I would like to thank you again for your attendance today, and I believe we can take your questions. I'm not sure if we have any questions, Mohammed.
Thanks, Atallah, for your presentation. And yes, we have some questions regarding how application works. And first question is related how Payment Guard itself to meet with CSP requirements. According to SWIFT Customer Security Program, all application that has interaction with payment infrastructure should meet with these requirements. And if Payment Guard is provided as a service, for example, via SWIFT Service Bureau, our Service Bureau, or our partner Service Bureau, how it will be deployed in the Service Bureau infrastructure?
Yeah, as we mentioned, Mohammed, Payment Guard provides scenarios, models that are specifically designed to cover requirements like CSP, and deploying our product can be done either on our Service Bureau as a cloud deployment or on-prem. We have specific integration that is designed for integrating with the SWIFT Alliance, and this integration will only require an installation of our integration component on SWIFT Alliance, and Payment Guard can reside either on-prem or on cloud as required. So the deployment and the coverage of requirement is very flexible, and we can even go further than CSP requirement to cover other cases that might be needed by our customers.
Okay, thank you, Atallah. And the second question about security certification. Does Payment Guard have any security certification or audit passed by authoritative company?
Yeah. When it comes to security, similar, Payment Guard is no different than any other product that we provide. We always ensure the security testing is executed, and this is done as a standard practice in Eastnets multiple times internally during the year and for major releases, from penetration, vulnerability assessment that is done internally and externally, in addition to third-party security assessment that is done on both static code analysis and vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. So we cover security requirements in different aspects and by different parties internally and externally to make sure that our product is up to the level of security that our customer expects. In addition to that, we always keep any new vulnerability in our scope, and we plan it as it is being identified. Similar to that would be the Log4j issue that was released, as I recall, before a couple of months. We reacted to that immediately, and after less than 1 week, we released a fix for our product to cope with or to mitigate such risk. So we are up to date with security issues, and we always qualify our products with the testing, either vulnerability assessments or penetration, and as well the static code assessment.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I remember that also as a customer support service, we provide all information about all new vulnerabilities, and we also send to our customers and partners some information regarding what they should do and to pay their attention, what kind of patch they will implement to avoid these new risks. So the next question is about integration of payment guard and how it will interact with SA SWIFT Alliance Access, and how, if I understand right, so payment guard has their own database that collect all information guard payments, and it needs to compare information between payment guard database and SA, and how the integration can be deployed, like SOAP or WebSphere and Q, and some kind of which way is
clear, Mohammed. I will reiterate on the point of integration with the SWIFT Alliance. As I mentioned, we have a dedicated connector that will connect the payment guard to SWIFT Alliance and will ensure that all traffic that is required to be flowing in and out towards SWIFT Alliance is being handled by our standard connector that is designed for SWIFT Alliance purpose. We have other integration methodologies. The RESTful APIs enables any system to integrate with our solution, and also the integration is both ways. So in case of you want to do the cross-checking towards your back office systems, you can integrate through RESTful APIs endpoints that are open towards your core bank, and payment guard will be utilizing those. And whenever you want to go towards the payment guard, you can also utilize the RESTful integration, RESTful API integration. And on top of that is the direct integration that is designated for SWIFT Alliance. So this is the general integration point. In terms of data, as you mentioned, Mohammed, we act with the information that is flowing from SWIFT. We keep a record of all the transactions that are being checked. And whenever, for example, a confirmation message is received, we will be able to map this back with the same transactions that is already checked with payment guard. So payment guard keeps its own record of transactions, and will be able to cross-check against those whenever, in the case of statements, in the case of confirmations or acknowledgements, so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and if we talk about other payment networks, not only SWIFT, as you mentioned, that payment guard is able to not only check SWIFT payments, but also we have ability, the application has ability to cover other payment channels, for example, Western Union, or MoneyGram, and or some local payment network. How it should be done in this case? What kind of integration you advise to our potential customers?
Similar to the integration that we are doing with the SWIFT Alliance, we can do the integration with any payment system or even any payment channel like e-banking or mobile banking to execute scenarios that relates to the end user. As we mentioned, we cover both the fraud that is directed towards the institution, like the messaging interface, or the end client. For example, I can have integration with mobile banking, and whenever the user is using an unusual device, I can get alerts of that, or even to detect something like zone hopping, where the user, for example, is executing payments from their mobile from Jordan, and suddenly they zone hop to the USA, for example. So this is an impossible distance to be covered within 30 minutes. So this is a red flag that we will also be able to detect. So integration is open, flexible, and can be done through RESTful APIs, similar to what we do with the SWIFT Alliance, and can be designed to that particular channel or payment methodology or system requirements, like the mobile banking or e-banking, so on and so forth.
Okay, and the last questions I got, it's related to system requirements of to support to payment guard. What kind of operational system, what kind of databases it's work now, and what, for example, customers need to have in order to implement payment guard.
Yeah, I would say that a payment guard is designed over microservices architecture. So there are multiple services that will interact together through a queuing solution. And this is also deployed over a relational database, Oracle SQL. So this has to be installed over a third-party relational database. And it can be managed as well from the customer end. But generally, our application requirements, I'm not sure if we will go over the specific details, but as I mentioned, this is a microservice architecture that is Java oriented in terms of programming languages, and consists of a queuing solution that will enable the interaction between our internal components.
Thank you, Atala. I think we can share the information regarding system requirements to people who will request it directly, and sure. Because it's provides some more details regarding hardware requirements and memory, and what kind of operating system and database.
What might be important as well, Magamed, to mention here is that requirements also depend on the level of scalability that you will expect and the throughput that you will need to achieve with our system, because as I mentioned, we use microservices, everything is scalable, so the requirements will depend. So maybe a more detailed discussion would be required to identify what is the specific requirement for each deployment.
Thank you, Atala. Thank you, attendees, to participate to our event. I would like to again remind that the main issue of this year process of customer security program audit, it's about time. If you need to go through this process, you should define which application you will use till end of this September. It means that you have all banks that have a very short time frame to make their decision regarding the application. That's why we are today share our knowledge in this area, what kind of application we have, and how we can help to financial institutions with to meet with new requirements. Also, I would like to add that Payment Guard is not something new application. It's a very mature application that was designed a long time ago, but now we tune it to meet with new requirements. It allows us to have a very deep experience of implementation, of using our application. As Atala mentioned, we have covered not only SWIFT networks, but other payment networks. So if you are interested in to get more information regarding the application, about how it will be implemented, and what's the price of the using our application as a service or dedicated type of implementation, please contact us and we will provide you this information. Also, we can arrange a dedicated presentation or demonstration session for people who will ask us, and also we will share today presentation and record of this session to whom we will ask us to provide it. So thank you very much again for participation today's session, and please contact us if you have questions, and we will glad to share our knowledge and information regarding this application and service. Thank you very much, and
thank you, Magamed. Thank you everyone for attending our webinar today.